That's quite a build-up. See if I can live up to it. Yeah, none of that's true, but... Well, I want to thank David Sims and Tom for inviting me to speak to all of you today. And I want to thank you for turning out on a Sunday afternoon. I would not have blamed you if you didn't come yesterday. It was so cold, colder than Boston. And I'm just really gratified to see this level of support for kind of a niche museum in some ways. I can say that coming from that niche world of musical instruments, but when Tom said, no, I think we got about 50 people signed up, I thought, well, that's about 40 more than I was, thinking. But thank you again for turning out. This is my third trip to Greenville and the Sigal Music Museum. I'm happy to be back for this occasion. Tom already stole my line that I spent yesterday and this morning having a really fun time looking at early American pianos. Now, that's a sentence you don't hear uttered very often. I had a really fun time looking at early American pianos. I think the only sentence that is less used than that is that the banjo player's Porsche parked outside? I think that has been noted as the least used sentence in the English language, but so it could be worse. But well, I'm going to start off this afternoon with a little bit of background about myself, and then I'm going to segue into the substance of the talk, which is about some really interesting discoveries I've made of historical instruments in various American collections, including some that ended up here at the Sigal Music Museum. I've created this to be pretty flexible. I've been given a generous amount of time, so we'll kind of see how it goes towards the end, and I want to leave time to let you fire questions at me. But so we can get this started. I've been asked a lot of times in my career, how did I get into this field? And how in the world did I end up with the coolest job in the world, working with that collection of nearly 1,200 instruments at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston? And the answer to that question is, I really have no idea how this happened. When I was a kid, I said to my parents, when I grow up, I want to be a musician. And they looked at me thoughtfully and said, well, you can't do both. So fortunately, I ended up not really becoming a musician, but I also found a career that doesn't really require you to grow up. Right? Now, people are often surprised when I tell them that I'm from South Dakota, which is followed by them scratching their heads and saying, is that one of the big rectangular states? And I'm sure being from South Carolina, you probably get tired of being confused with North Carolina, and people always like, no, South Dakota, North Dakota. I say, yeah, just Dakota Territory. Just let's think of it that way. But when I tell them that I was born in Deadwood, then they think I'm just making that up. Because, Deadwood's surely just the name of a fictional TV show on HBO, which is primarily known for more use of the F word per minute than any TV program or movie in history. But it's true, I was born in Deadwood. Though I actually spent my first 10 years in nearby Sturgis, South Dakota, home of the world's largest motorcycle rally. And people, well, now you're just really embellishing the tale here. And it's like, no, I lived in Sturgis, South Dakota, and it's an interesting place to go. So besides playing the piano from about the age of 6, I took the trumpet when I was 10. I played it into college, including in my high school marching band, you can see here. Then in my sophomore year, a friend encouraged me to take up the double bass because our high school orchestra had no bass players at that time. And what resulted in my senior year, they had to create a unique award at my high school for me because of this universal, this versatility that I had. Later on, I taught myself to play the recorder fairly well, and enough that we performed Bach's Fourth Brandenburg Concerto with a little short-lived amateur chamber orchestra in Rapid City, South Dakota, which is where I lived after the age of 10. I dare say that's the only time before, and I don't think the Bach Brandenburg Concerto has been performed in Rapid City ever since. Maybe shouldn't have been performed that time too. Later on, I laid my hands on a small harp that was for sale at a music store, and I learned enough chords to to write a little piece and accompany a piece at a friend's wedding. I do think the real turning point came, and the hair is going to get worse here. I could feel you holding in. Are we supposed to laugh? Go ahead. The turning point was when my local Methodist church bought a Zuckerman harpsichord kit in 1973, and the organist assembled it, and then it was left for me to figure out how to make the thing work properly. And to do that in western South Dakota in the mid-'70s was no small challenge. I mean, there was almost nothing in print about how to, regulate harpsichords and do this work. And no one within literally 1,000 miles that had any experience doing this. But this did, sow the seed, and I found myself taking apart pianos and learning more about how they work. And I was kind of one of those weird kids. I couldn't just stick with just one instrument or just one aspect of it. Now, the next really big step came when I attended the University of South Dakota in Vermillion, which is at the eastern end of South Dakota. And that is home to the National Music Museum. Although when I was there, it was called the Shrine to Music Museum, and it's been very difficult for me not to refer to it as the Shrine, but it is the National Music Museum, NMM. I studied harpsichord performance in the university's music department, but I gradually forged relationships with the staff at the museum and eventually enrolled in a master's program that they administered. And that's kind of a terrifying step for me at the time, but I was there at just the right time. This museum took over this building. It was shared with the State History Museum, and this provided me with lots of work involved with renovations to the building. Among my many duties was building a shipping crate for a sousaphone, but also constructing a kit to make a forte piano. Around this time, this museum also acquired a world-famous collection of the early Italian string instruments, and I got to design and build these display cases and make all of the plexiglass mounts for these very rare instruments. Now, when I graduated from that master's program, I really didn't know what to do next. I thought you might just keep going to school till you figure it out. So I got enrolled in a PhD program at the University of Michigan because they have a collection of instruments there called the Stearns Collection. I thought, well, maybe I could work with that. But the universe, as it often has, had other plans for me and landed me in this position as department assistant at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston with their instrument collection. I think it's always good to work at a museum with some pillars out front. I don't know if you saw the pillars at the National Museum. Something to keep in mind there, David, and get some pillars. Very impressive. So by the early as Tom alluded, I eventually rose to the position of department head for the musical instrument collection. I had to murder my predecessor to do it, but no, he's still active in the museum field. But in the early 1990s, I developed a relationship down the street with the Boston Symphony Orchestra because they have a collection of instruments, and I became their voluntary curator. I still am. But this got me interested in other collections all over New England. There's instruments in all sorts of places. But back to the MFA for a moment. There's no denying that the apex of my career there was in 2000. I had the privilege of curating an exhibition of 130 guitars dating from the early 1500s to the present. And this afforded me the chance to learn about guitar design through the ages and certainly how to organize an exhibition. But also I got to meet guitar legends like Les Paul, Chet Atkins, Joe Perry from Aerosmith, Jay Giles Band, and Steve Howe from the band Yes, and the always eccentric Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick. This was pretty much the first exhibition at a major art museum devoted just to a musical instrument, and it was critically acclaimed in the press, attended by over 150,000 visitors in a 3-month span. Now, some said it was foolish to let my hair grow for 2 years just so that I could feel like a cool guy curating this show. It resulted in this rather unfortunate driver's license. Trust me, you show up at TSA with that driver's license, they're going to search your bag for drugs. The upside was I could get a side gig. At night, I could play the role of Riff Raff in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So. All right. Well, my job at the MFA was really a dream come true those whole 34 years. I'm really proud of my legacy there of some great expositions and nice live programs. One of the things I'm most proud of is a series of almost 50 videos of musicians performing brief pieces on mostly unusual instruments from the museum's collection. And you can see these on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, type in MFA musical instruments. You will find these wonderful, they're usually about 3 minutes long or less. So I mentioned earlier I was poking around other instrument collections and starting with the BSO, and this got me interested in exploring other collections all over New England, especially smaller museums, historical societies, where you might find anything from a military fife to a circular Chinese lute. One of the biggest, richest finds was up the road from Boston in Salem, the Peabody Essex Museum, which is arguably the oldest continually operating museum in America. Their founding really goes back to 1796. They have nearly 600 instruments, especially ones from East Asia, Oceania, that were brought back to Salem often by ship captains. I'm still hoping that they're going to finally hire me to catalog this amazing collection of instruments, because no one has ever done this. And they've got little catalog records that say string instrument ? China ? We can get to the bottom of that. Just call me. So in this process, I ultimately corresponded with hundreds of museums all over the Northeast, and this was back in the mid-1990s, to find out what they had. And so there's basic information in a database now for about 4,000 of these instruments. I haven't got it online yet, but I've been talking with Tom about others of a way to get that information online. Now, we're kind of segueing into the meat of the talk here. This survey of other museums and historical societies, this kind of coincided with my growing interest in early American instruments. And that was certainly launched into a higher gear when I published this article Tom alluded to that was about an instrument maker named Benjamin Krehor. This is a silhouette of him. He was the first sort of named, known maker of instruments in the New England area. It won a publication prize, but it made me realize there's much more out there to be discovered if you just look around. So with that, I'll kind of segue into what some of those actual discoveries are, and we'll start with Krehor himself. Now, at this time, we knew he had made pianos and these cellos, which they called them a bass viol. They were used to accompany choirs in churches, keep them on pitch. And there were only 5 of these bass viols by Krehor known at the time, but 4 were at the MFA. I thought, well, that's reason enough to write an article, which is how that came about. And then likewise, there was only 5 pianos by him known at the time, but the MFA didn't have one. So I got to know this family that had one. They were descendants of Benjamin Krehor. They went out and bought this piano in the 20th century knowing that it was something made by the ancestor. But I went out to examine it, and it was kind of funny. As I was getting ready to leave, the owner said, well, is this something the MFA would want? Yeah. So we subsequently got that, and it's on a place of prominence in the museum's wing for American art. So that was one of the first really sort of pleasant discoveries for me of something that did end up in the MFA. There have been other Krehor instruments that have surfaced. As soon as you publish something, then other stuff comes out of the woodwork, and so you have to go back and do a revision someday, maybe. But this was a curious one. This was 2015. We had a super large amount of snow in Boston that year. That's why I remember it. I was contacted by the First Church of Dorchester, which is a suburb of part of Boston, and they said, we've got a bass viol here that we think is probably as old as the church, like 1680. I thought that would be unusual. I thought more likely one of those sort of cello size things. Those were around. So I went over to visit them, and this was up in a closet. I thought, oh God, it's a double bass, one of the big guys. And I'm looking at it, seeing if it's got any markings. No markings on it, but I can just tell it's American made. It's not a European instrument. and they had this little sort of hang tag on it. 3-string bass viol, rare instrument used from 1650 to 1800 to accompany singing. It was made in the earliest string instrument factory in the U.S., located in the part of Dorchester now called Milton. Well, that's where Krihor worked, was in Milton. He was born in Dorchester. I thought, this is maybe oral history, but it's pretty solid. I would love to dig through their, if they still have their archives, there's probably a receipt for the purchase of this instrument. But as I got to pondering this, I realized that this is the earliest known example in America of a double bass. And here it was, and they wanted to know, did the MFA want to buy it or take it on loan? I said, I just don't know what's going to be. It will just end up in storage. So it's in the hands of a private collector, but I know that he will do the right thing, buy it. Not all that many years ago, another instrument turned up at an auction, and Marlo Sigal of Sigal Collection called me about this, and I knew him from 1985 onwards, and we were friends and colleagues, and he kind of wanted some urging to whether he should go after this, and I said, absolutely. It needed some work, cosmetically and mechanically, but you can see on the name board there, it says Krihor and Babcock. We'll come to Mr. Babcock in a moment. He was one of two brothers who was protégés of Krihor, and we knew they had been in partnership just through newspaper advertisements, but here was concrete proof, a piano with Krihor and Babcock. Moreover, the name board is just beautifully painted by an ornamental painter in Boston named John Ritto Penniman, and this is now in here in Greenville. It's been on view. It's not currently, and this is not the best photo of the. This is at auction. I drug my feet and didn't get a good photo from Tom, but so that's a little bit about Krihor there. Then Babcock. Well, I thought, and this is the die was cast for me. I learned about Krihor. I said, I want to know the next generation. So these Babcock brothers, the more famous of the two because he lived longer, was Alphaeus Babcock. He's survived by 120 pianos made between 1810 and the 1830s. A lot of them look like this. This is one at the MFA. How many do you have here, Tom?
We have 2 that look like that.
Okay. And then the one we saw, yeah. Yeah, Marlo Sigal had 4. He sent one to his hometown in he gave one to a house in Boston, to the Shirley Eustace House, governor's house near where he worked. Another one ended up with a private public collection in Boston. And then did two of his come here? You had,
yeah, but
you had one already, right?
Right.
All right. So anyway, they're all over the place. We don't get bogged down in numbers here. Even people that are casually familiar with piano history have heard the name Babcock, because he was the first to come up with a patent for a one-piece iron frame to support the tension of the strings. This is a absolutely essential ingredient in the construction of any piano nowadays. And in the 19th century, there was some debate about who actually had come up with this first. Well, it's right there in the patent records. 1825, Alphaeus Babcock patented this iron frame. This is turned on its side. This is it as applied to a piano in Boston. So a little bit about this particular piano. Let's see. Here's a frontal view of it, and it's like, well, that's very nice. What's that stuff below there? That is a 3-rank pipe organ. This is an organized piano, as opposed to a disorganized. That's the term they used, was organized piano. Now, this was I tell this story about the finding this. I drove out to Western Mass to give a slide talk, not unlike this, about harps at the MFA, because the Historical Harp Society was meeting there. I thought, I should go out there. And I'll be honest, I kind of was like, I'm going to go out and give the talk and just come back. I don't want to hang out with these people. But I stayed overnight. I thought I should socialize. I'm having lunch with this guy, and I probably came out that I was interested in Boston pianos, and he was saying, yeah, he says, yeah, I have a claviorganum by Babcock. Clavierorganum is a very sort of antiquated word for a combination of a string keyboard instrument and an organ together. It's a Clavierorganums. And I said, really? He says, yeah, it's a Babcock sitting on top of a pipe organ. I said, he says, yeah, it's got the iron frame. Back up, I mean, it has the iron frame. There's only one known piano anywhere that has Babcock's iron frame. In spite of patenting it, he didn't use it as often as you might think. And that instrument was at the Smithsonian. I said, it has the iron frame. He says, yeah, no. I said, really? We need to talk about this. So I flew to Rochester, where he lived, and took a look at this thing. And then I forgot how much he's going to want for this. I don't want to get in a bidding war with some other museum. And I won't reveal numbers here, but we did acquire it for the MFA. It needs a lot of work cosmetically, as you can see, and probably should just be left untouched because it's such a rare piece. So it does have that iron frame in it, and likewise sitting on top of the 3-rank pipe organ. We've subsequently figured out that the maker of the organ parts were probably William Goodrich. There's not that many candidates in Boston that could have made it anyway. And he had a relationship with Babcock, and we know that he organized 3 pianos during his career. We think this one was done, it's about 1829, was done for Caleb Eddy, who was the president of the Middlesex Canal. Would have been like being the head of a railroad at the time. The Middlesex Canal ran from Lowell down to Boston and was a way to move goods. So interesting story with it. But then there's this piano, which Tom and I were spending time with this morning. This is the only other known Babcock made in Boston. The one I referred to at the Smithsonian was made in Philadelphia when Babcock was there for a period in the 1830s. But this is now only the second one made in Boston that has the iron frame. Now this one I came across through some networking. It was down in Warwick, Rhode Island. Piano technician named David Sylvester, not a collector. He just had salvaged this, saved this from somewhere. And I went and looked at it cursorily back in the late 90s and thought, well, I know where it is. I'll get back down there to see it. And I didn't. And after retiring in 2020, and being able to then start working on this topic much more, I got to wondering, I don't know if this guy's even alive anymore. If he has the piano, I should probably get on this. So I didn't really have it. He doesn't use the internet, and I had a phone number for him, and I double checked it against some references on the internet, and I was just try. So the phone number, I don't know, there was no greeting. It just went to the voicemail, and or a phone answering machine. I don't know. And I said, I'm hoping to reach David Sylvester. This is Darcy Kuronen, that we met many years ago. I'm calling about suddenly he comes on the phone, Darcy Kuronen! Oh, yeah, it's David Sylvester. How have you been? Yeah, what was that, 98? Yeah, Babcock piano. I couldn't get him. He just kept going and going. I said, well, yeah, you still got that? Oh, yeah. But the timing was perfect. He was getting at a point in his life he needed to start finding homes for this stuff. And so I was pondering and talking to colleagues about where it should go. And objectively speaking, this seemed like the best place. So I'm really happy to have it here and can spend time with it. And promise Tom I will get a scholarly article out about these 2 Babcock finds just as soon as I can sit still long enough to write that article. That the organized piano, that was found at up northern New Hampshire in an outbuilding. The guy who owned it, I think I'm going to make a player organ out of it or something like that. And it was there was a reason why it was in kind of tough shape. It had been in this outbuilding. It was full of rat's nest, mouse nest. It had 3 completely chewed corn cobs down in the bottom. It's kind of a funny thing. But
the moment we found out that we could do this deal, Tim Marshall and I flew up to Providence, rented a truck, drove over to see the guy, spent the afternoon with him. We loaded the piano onto the truck, and then we got to drive home from Providence back to England. It was a lot of fun.
So this is it's a little cleaner now, but this is the one we looked at this morning. So yeah, really quite an important find, and one again I'm proud of, but proud that also found a good home for it. But so let's look at another instrument maker. This guy, Krehor, worked in Milton. Well, the next town over is Canton, Canton. And my predecessor at the MFA had found this little harmonica at an antique store in, I think, Essex, Massachusetts, and got to looking at it. It was inscribed by James A. Bazin, B-A-Z-I-N, sold by a merchant there in Boston named John Ashton. And I got to looking into this. The store that sold it was in business like in the 1830s. And I was like, there are no American harmonicas at that time or much, much later. That's a very German sort of thing. Hohner was the big company. I thought, well, this is quite a find. And I think a lot of people would have looked at this at an antique store and go, I don't know, some sort of toy or something. I don't know what this is. But it held great meaning to me and suddenly set me off on the next hunt of who was James A. Bazin. Well, he was this handsome character. This is a self-portrait in pastel, I think. He did everything. He was a lifelong bachelor in Canton. Town historian. He was very into horticulture and history. He built a camera obscura in his house. Do you know what this is? It brings in light from the outside and projects onto the walls the outside view. And this is a novelty the kids love to come and see. And he donated his books to the town library and was quite a character. Now, no one in Canton says Bazin. They all say, oh, James Bazin. Yeah, Bazin. But he was born of Huguenot parents in Boston, and so it's Bazin. And it's said that he had a French accent his whole life. So I imagine he introduced himself as Mr. Bazin, not Bazin. But so that little harmonica led me on to a bunch of other things that he had invented. Wasn't a very good marketer and didn't get his butt to the patent office enough to protect his ideas. Just kind of a peripatetic inventor. The thing he is most known for is what's called a lap organ, or a melodeon was the term at the time. This rests on a table or on your lap, looks like that, and you rock the bellows back and forth with your left forearm while still trying to play these buttons. It's a very awkward thing. Go to YouTube, you will see me playing a later example of these, and it's so you can't play a lot, but you can play a hymn, which is what they were being used for in churches. Got rid of those bass viols and switched over to this. You can play chords and stuff. This is a particularly fancy one. I don't know why. They usually don't look like this. This was in a private collection south of Boston, and I got to know this guy, and he more or less happily gave it to the MFA, and so that was a nice find as well. There are later makers in New Hampshire who took up this idea and made them in great numbers, and especially a guy named Prescott. And Bazin wrote about this there. He was so mad that these people had stolen his idea, but he hadn't patented it. And these guys from Concord said, well, we can make these, and they made them in great numbers. Again, lap organ, sometimes they're called a teeter because of the way they rock back and forth, or a rocking melodeon. But yeah, you can't do a lot with them, especially with those buttons. They later put a regular keyboard on them, which helped, but the turning point was like, maybe a pedal to operate the bellows instead of trying to do this chicken wing thing with your arms there. But so that would have been a nice find on its own. But I went to most of what he made is still at the Canton Historical Society. He just gave his whole estate, his dinnerware, books, plates, everything. He made this, and you won't have a sense of the scale. That ring is about 8 inches across, 9 inches across. He called it a reed trumpet. Now, first of all, the reed that is in these instruments is called a free reed. It's the thing that you hear from a harmonica, reed organ, accordion. It's this brass reed that vibrates in a certain way. So radiating around this circle is a series of 36 of these reeds. So the big knob on top you can rotate to select a different reed. Not very, effectively, but you blow in one end and then projects out the other. I borrowed this and kind of got it working enough you could kind of play, kind of have to glissando through the notes. You can't but it's stupidly sophisticated. It's like, okay, so it's a chromatic scale, if you know what that is. Like, well, what if I just want to play a C scale? He's got it set up. There's an inner ring that you can block the notes you don't need, and you can do that for any key. It's just stupidly complicated. And he said, it's like, yeah, I have to charge $150 for these. It's like, you can buy a piano for that or less. And, there was, he played this at church. You could hear it miles away. No, you couldn't hear it miles away. That's not, but it was an interesting thing. And then he made a little smaller one, but these are all at the Canton Historical Society. I'm just fascinated by him. But he kept making other things. Here's another little reed organ he made. Now, this does have pedals, but instead of going like this, there's stirrups. You put your feet in and go this way. But look at this goofy keyboard, too. It's like, I don't know how that works. This is in a nearby town, Taunton. So I found that, and this all resulted in my second big, second or third big article. Digressed for another story here too. So, I had surveyed these museums and kind of knew what. A lot of them would write back to me and just say, "Well, we have a cello, we have a guitar, we have a drum, nothing else, no information." So I was on my way over to visit a guy in Lexington, Mass, who has the world's finest collection of banjos. You go, oh, another banjo joke. Because when I say that, world's finest collection of banjos, people go, finest collection of banjos. It's like, no, it really is. It's this outstanding collection, but it kind of sounds like saying world's finest collection of thimbles, which is at the MFA. It is. They have the world's finest collection of thimbles. But anyway, I was on my way, and I was early, so I thought, I'm just going to stop in at the Arlington Historical Society and just see if they can show me anything. I go in. The volunteer staff is sitting around having coffee, but the registrar was there, volunteer. She says, well, I'll get my hair done in about 30 minutes, but I could pull out a couple things for you. And so she went downstairs, came up with a guitar, looked over, no markings, really in kind of bad shape, hard to say what it was. Then she came up with a drum, same thing as it could be anywhere from 1820 to 1860. Drums get used long periods of time. Then she brought up this cello, and again I thought, well, this isn't going well. I'll just see what the label says. Well, of course, it said Benjamin Krehor. This is after I had published my article, and I thought, this thing has been sitting over in Arlington for 100 years. They know exactly who played it and at what church, but they'd never heard of Benjamin Krehor. So I said, well, this is a very valuable piece. They go, like, $1 million valuable? I said, no, like, please put plastic on it when it's in storage. Very important historically, but what a great find. I thought, boy, I could walk away a happy man. I said, well, what else you got? So they bring up this little lap organ. I thought, this does not look like the ones you usually see made in Concord, which were made by the dozens. There's no markings on it. And I said, do you have a screwdriver? Yeah. Okay. Don't look. So I get it open, and I don't know if I have a slide of it or not, but inside, James Bazin, dated and everything. So this was before I did the article, thankfully. So it's like, but it made me realize if I just took the time to drive around to all of these little historical societies, God knows what I would find. There was 2 huge scores in one drop-in visit. So if I had my druthers and someone would just fund me for the rest of my life, this is what I would do. I would just drive around and go, what do you got? Let's take a look. So that was a fun discovery. It didn't end up as an acquisition for the MFA. And then in the process, I was looking at this photo of this instrument at the Smithsonian. They know what they're doing, right? And I thought, stirrups, that's very unusual. And I got a colleague there, like, can you take a closer look at this? Their catalog said, yeah, probably German, 1850 or so. He takes out the name board, flips it over, handwritten on the back, James Bazin, patent 18. They hadn't looked at it closely, but so there was, you don't always have to go there. Sometimes you can get a colleague to look at it. And then this instrument was a private collection in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I knew this guy, and he was trying to find homes for his many reed organs, and I'd read about this when it was made in Boston, just south of the museum, by Adam Stewart, 1838. And these stirrups, again, there's no one else making. He must have known Bazin. They must have, been some interchange there, because this is not a normal way to do this. But this did subsequently come to the MFA. So between that Bazin lap organ, this one, and another one you're going to see, 3 of the earliest known American reed organs are all at the MFA, and I'm trying to write an article about that too when I find time. I dropped back into the Canton Historical Society, I don't know, not that many years ago, to go with someone else, who I'll talk about in a moment. And I said, what's that in the corner? Is that, oh yeah, someone dropped off another Bazin reed organ. Thanks a lot. So I just took a snapshot of that and got to go back. But the reason I was there was to look at not this instrument, one like it. I couldn't get a photo of the one that we looked at. It's a bass viol, almost certainly by Creer, and it's huge. It's not a double bass, but it's just this massively big cello type instrument. And I went with this colleague to see that, but because I had seen it the first time, I went down there to look at Bazin reed organs. Hanging up on the wall is this massive cello, and a colleague, he says, Benjamin Creedor, it has to be. I mean, it's so eccentric, because it was like this one from the MFA, which is 1788, earliest datable string instrument made in New England. So all this sort of crossover here, of course, it does help that they're living in the same region. Okay, well, let's leave New England for a moment. Go down to Philadelphia, which is one of my current interests. This unusual guitar is called a harp guitar. The only harp-like feature is that it has this extension that lets it rest on the floor. It doesn't have harp-like strings. It's a regular guitar. And you can see a video of this on YouTube. And I just thought it was a really cool-looking thing and wanted it for the guitar show, so we got it. Belonged to the Smith College Music Department in Northampton. I think one of the only remaining all-girls schools still, but a music professor had sold her collection of, I don't know, 40, 50 instruments to them back in the 30s. And this was there, and I'd seen it when I was out there for some conferences. And I thought, I think this should be at the MFA, not in an unhumidified glass case in a music building. And so I talked him into selling it to the MFA. And then I got interested in this and thought, well, let's find out where the other harp guitars by this maker. His name is Emilius Scherr, S-C-H-E-R-R, Danish-born instrument maker who came to Philadelphia in the mid-1820s. I was going to write an article about this, his guitars, and I tracking him down everywhere, and was probably 90% done on the article. And a colleague is like, "When are you going to finish that up?" One of the things I love about it is the decoration on the back. Is this bronze stencil work, which you can see on a lot of pianos here. It's real high style stuff. So I was kind of, just trying to sprint to the end to finish that article about these guitars, which here's the playing position. I love this sort of period advertisement where notice that he has it between his legs, but she's got her side saddle, or more ladylike, patented harp guitar. Well, I get some kind of bad Polaroids in the mail from someone living in downtown Boston, what's called the Back Bay area. Yeah, I've got this funny little piano thing. Could you look at it? Well, it ain't no piano, and it ain't like anything I've ever seen. It's got pedals that look like they probably is for a reed organ. So I go down to see her and was just flabbergasted. This was probably, I don't know, there was so many things about this. So it is a reed organ, probably made in the 1830s by Emilius Scherr. I'd gotten far along enough in my research. He was primarily known as a piano maker and had built organs. There are no surviving organs by him, but pianos. And but here's this thing, this reed organ, and it's like, first of all, there are no other reed organ makers in Philadelphia ever. It's a very New England and Northeastern sort of thing. And so that was right off the bat. That was something. I looked at the number of notes. It's got 5 octaves, 60 notes. That's an octave more than any other reed organ from the 1830s, 40s. It's also one of the first to have a regular keyboard instead of those buttons like we saw on the Vermillion. And You know, it's like it's nicely made. It's got this interesting stand. It's got this period stool with it, which the decorative arts furniture people, they might feel like, we like that. That's that's kind of important. It's got this carved sort of fish head on it and stuff. That's as important as the reed organ. But we got into it deeper, and so that lid is very deep for a reason. This panel folds down out of the lid. Well, what does that do? You open it up, and there's a mirror, and then all these little compartments, what they call a workbox. This is for ladies. You put your sewing things in there, your pencils, your ink, your whatever, and there were work boxes made in the period. And I've seen workbox pianos before, tiny little things with these compartments. Never seen a workbox reed organ before. And so we began the discussion of this needs to come to the MFA, and we finally got her to sell it to us. But then she put up the money to have it cosmetically restored. It was missing some things, including that whole panel with the mirror. That had to be reconstructed. There's a close-up of the workbox part with these little lidded compartments. You have to have a lid over that before you put it up into the big lid, otherwise it'll fall out. So we knew it had to have that lid. Now, of course, I was so proud. We found the only known reed organ by Cher. Except that the Philadelphia Art Museum found this one at auction and bought it. It's on prominent display. A good thing they did, because it had pieces on it intact we didn't have, so we could get information and make the panel for the mirrored panel and stuff like that. So the problem was, like, I'm not going to do a separate article about reed organs of Cher. I should combine it with the piano, with the guitars. But then people go, and you left out the pianos? I mean, that was his main business. So now I'm desperately trying to get that article finished up too. The problem was there just weren't that many pianos out there. We couldn't find any. Tom Strange helped that by acquiring 2. He increased it by, a third of what we knew. And so yesterday we spent time looking at Cher pianos. So I don't have much excuse now to finish. I've seen enough. I think I can write the article. So that has been fun. Let's see, what else do I got to? Oh, so researching the guitar article, I had seen stuff about Cher, and he advertised, he also offers his newly patented harp guitar. Yeah, we know that. And pronounced by connoisseurs approximate to the empowered to the Spanish guitar, and harmonica. No, not harmonica. A colleague of mine thought, I think he means probably the glass harmonica. Benjamin Franklin, that was in the air. It's like, yeah, maybe. I don't know if you can make this out. It says PHYS, fizz harmonica. Fizz harmonica. This was a term used by the Germans for the earliest reed organs that they were making. Cher adopted that term. That's what he's advertising, is his harmonicas. So now we finally knew. If I just get the article done, we can share it with the world. Dying to know. Oh, this is one of the beautiful Chers that Tom found at an auction in Kentucky and brought it safely back here to Greenville. Okay, again, I want to keep on track here. Drums. I think drums are kind of cool, and they're overlooked. They tend to be the purview of the military historians more than instrument people. They know a lot about drums. And when I was writing to historical societies, do you have musical instruments? One of my favorite letters came back. We don't have any musical instruments, but we do have some drums. Well, send those anyway. Because what's fun about them is that oftentimes inside, and if the heads are torn off, you can see it readily, but even if the heads are intact, there's a little air hole there, and you can peek through that, and if anyone's written on it or labeled it, it's opposite that hole. This is one that belongs to the MFA that turned up in a local family. Here's this beautifully large advertisement for this place that sold this drum. Prentice was his name, and and this has some pretty nice decoration on it. It seems to be emblems of Massachusetts militia. These were made very much in the 30s and 40s for militia outfits. But this one turned up not too many years ago and is at the MFA and also prominently displayed now in their American wing. It's the most beautifully decorated militia drum I've ever seen. We're not quite sure who made the drum, and that's always slippery because, frankly, it's just not that hard to make a drum. You know, a cooper, anyone who can bend wood like that can make one. So it's harder to nail down that someone was a drum maker. But we know who the painter was on. His name was Charles Hubbard. And, you know, just a fantastically colorful and decorative thing. Again, with sort of emblems that suggest a Massachusetts relationship. This, again, it needs to be researched by those military guys. They know this stuff much more than the instrument people. Well, probably one of my favorite ones, which it looks a bit derelict here, but having written to all of these historical societies, and you ask, well, how did I know who to write to? I just got out the American Association of Museums directory and just kind of went through and saw the descriptions of a museum. Well, if it was a farm implement museum, I didn't write to them. If it was an aquarium, I didn't write to them. But if I thought there was any inkling they might have an instrument, I wrote to them. But I didn't write to the Massachusetts State Archives. I thought, well, that's all paper. So they called me and said, yeah, we've got some drums that we don't know how to care for and whatever, and they're kind of falling apart. And could you come and look at these? And they had the expected assortment of sort of Civil War period ones, and they were nice. But then they pulled out this one. This had been salvaged from the Battle of Bennington, Vermont in 1777, along with some other artifacts seized from the Hessian troops that were working with the British. They had one of those, there's a name for it, I don't know, this is kind of this pointy little headpiece that the Hessians wore. They had a saber, and this had all been collected by one family, had been in the family, and given to the Massachusetts State Archives. But including this drum, which is a brass shell, not wood. And it was used by the Hessian troops. And the emblems on it tell you exactly which Hessian group in Brunswick played this thing. It's got a surviving pair of drumsticks and a drumstick holder. I was like, oh my God, this has just been sitting here at the Mass. I kept wanting to borrow this and let's get it kind of set up. Because people, you know, fife and drum, American Revolution, fife and drum, it's like, find me a fife or a drum that you can say certifiably was used in the American Revolution. There aren't many. And this one isn't American made, but we can sure say it was used in the American Revolution. I thought this just shouldn't be out there at the Mass Archives, and it probably, hopefully, still is. But that was kind of, you know, a wonderfully startling sort of find. Okay, well, let's get back to keyboards, but we're going to go to England now. In 1902, the Chickering Piano Company put on this big exhibition in Boston about musical instruments. And kind of their subtext was, you know, from the the primitive mouth bow of Africa to the Chickering grand piano, look at this evolution, and you know. But they gathered together an amazing assortment of things, and I really wonder where some of them are now. There aren't many photographs in this little catalog, and the descriptions are too brief to know. But one of the things in it was this little upright piano. And this had belonged at the time to the New England Conservatory of Music. They were trying to put together a collection of instruments to match that in Paris and Brussels conservatoires, and it never really took off. And this had been sitting, people thought, yeah, there's that funny little upright piano at NEC. And so we got this to the MFA. We subsequently acquired it. We rescued several things because, to be honest, a music school is not a good place for instruments. They don't know what to do with them, and it's not a good situation. So we got this, and it was sitting in my office, it's tiny enough, and couldn't make head nor tail of it. And a colleague of Tom's Tim Strange, Tim Hamilton, Tom Strange, Tim Hamilton. Tim was there, and I had to go talk to a visitor. By the time I'd come back to the office, he says, "That's by Robert Woffington." I said, "How do you know?" Because the other one sold at auction. He had the auction catalog down and showed me. It was at a collection in England called Finchcock's, and I don't know where it ended up. So I got myself over there to look at that one, which looks like that. It has this tracery brasswork in the upper part. The MFA one had to be cosmetically restored quite a bit, but I got to puzzling this one out too. It's like there were upright pianos already in the mid 1700s, but this is probably the first example where instead of the strings starting at the keyboard and going upwards, making a very tall piano, the strings go down to the floor like they do on modern upright pianos. This is as near as I can tell, the earliest example. People used to say, well, it was John Isaac Hawkins in Philadelphia, 1800. It's like, this is before 1800, stylistically. So this is the earliest modern style upright piano, and just a gorgeous little sort of, Sheraton style piece that is regrettably not on view at the MFA, but someday it'll come back. So then, around the corner from the MFA is the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which, if you know that name, is because they're infamous for one of the biggest art thefts in history. They lost a Rembrandt and a Vermeer in that process. Still wondering where they are. There's been lots of interesting podcasts and stuff about this. They've got, I don't know, 6 or 7 instruments. You could walk right by this one. You can't tell in this context, but it's sitting in like a 17th century caisson. It's like a big box, but there's a beautiful Botticelli above it, so nobody looks down. But here was this guitar. I think it was kind of fancy, and I, again, in my process of cataloging things in other collections, I made note of this. The maker said Mosca Cavalli. I didn't know, was that hyphenated, or is his first name Mosca? It turns out it's Jacopo Mosca Cavalli. I thought, that's kind of a neat thing. I'll keep an eye on that. But lo and behold, a trustee of the MFA came back from a trip to Europe, and he'd been to this dealer in Paris, had these beautiful color photographs of a guitar made by Mosca Cavalli. There's almost nothing known about him, and as far as I knew, the one at the Gardner was the only known instrument. But here's another one. The MFA did subsequently acquire this. It's a little fancier, than the one at the Gardner, but I still don't know of any other instruments by Mosca Cavalli. So now the only 2 that exist are about 500 yards apart in Boston. Someone ought to write an article about these if you had time. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, they did some cosmetic restoration on theirs, and we actually took it to a hospital. We did some x-rays and other things to try to see inside. We did find a label inside, which was unfortunately covered up by later repair work, but they have these beautiful rosettes. That's the Gardner on the left with this tripartite rosette, and then this one that's carved wood in there. And then the headstocks have these emblems that someone deciphered, well, the dealer in Paris deciphered, that these relate to 2 aristocratic families in Rome. Cavalli worked in Perugia. It was not too far from Rome. But these emblems represent the Chigi family, Chigi, and the Pamphili family. These were noble Roman families, some of which members of which became popes, became part of the papacy. But what does it mean? Why are these emblems on there? Did it represent the marriage of Chigi and Pamphili? Did they commission? Were they supporters of Mosca Cavalli? All questions yet to be unraveled in that article that someone's going to write. But this is, again, there's just so much out there. Okay, well, this is going to time out just wonderfully, I think. So we'll leave Europe all together here. We'll go to the Middle East. One of the things, the best part of my job at the MFA, I got to buy things that I like, but use someone else's money to get to go shopping. But there was a strategy, and a lot of it was filling gaps in this nominally encyclopedic collection. And I thought, I can't believe we don't have a decent oud, this lute of the Middle East, the queen or king of instruments of Middle Eastern music. We've got to get one. In the Boston area was a guy named Peter Cavellos, who was a master maker of these instruments, but was also sent ouds for restoration from all over the world, because it's just that well known. I said, Peter, you got to help us find an oud. He goes, the guys that own these things will not part with them. they're fragile, they don't survive, and once they get one, it isn't the money. They just don't want to let them go. He said, but the one I'd recommend is by a Greek maker who worked in Turkey named Emanuel Venios. Although no one ever calls these Venios oud, they call it a manual, short for Emmanuel. So, oh, you got a manual. I said, well, how we get? Well, I don't know. Then he called me. He says, there's a psychiatrist in Ohio. He's already got 5 manuals, and he found this 6th one he wants me to work on, and he might sell it to him if he wants me to work on it first, and then he'll see. I said, talk him into it, Now, Peter had to do a fair amount of work on this, but, the body was intact, and so I tell the psychiatrist he can have visiting privileges. Well, we've got to have this oud. It's 1899, and that's quite early for one of these things to survive. So that was great. But I thought ideally we would have not just a Turkish model, but we would have also a Syrian one. And Peter was a little just, those Syrian ones are supermarket ouds. I mean, they're just garishly decorating, and literally you can just go in a supermarket and there's something to buy them there. They're just kind of the junk. I said, okay, well, but he did allude to that there was this family in Damascus named Nahat, N-A-H-A-T, several generations that made ouds. I said, well, God, let me know if you ever find one of those. Peter had this one all along. Never told me about it. Didn't tell many people about it.
Yeah.
He had jointly owned it with some other guy in New Hampshire, and that guy said, you know what, Peter, I know we talked about whoever dies first, the other guy gets to, but you just take it, And Peter, unfortunately, had a stroke, and he couldn't work anymore, and I kept meaning to go visit him, but so after he had passed away, his son came to me and said, my dad had this Nahat oud. I said, oh, yeah. He said, yeah. And he would bring it out sometimes when people started asking too many questions about it. He'd put it away. So I'm not going to, because he knew that if word got out, people would just be pushing, sell me that oud. It is, I've never seen a fancier, better made oud. This is from 1926, I think, give or take. And as his father was ailing, his son said, let's sell that oud and get some money to help with your medical bills. No, I want to keep it. When I die, call Darcy and see if he'll buy it. So we did. It was not cheap. I will be discreet and not share the price, but well worth it. And, the MFA could have, not cheap, but compared to what most curators at an art museum buy, it's a pretty cheap date.
How do you spell oud?
Well, that's a good question. Classically, O-U-D. The word comes from al-oud, A-L apostrophe U-D. Oud means the wood. And that's where we get the term lute, is a transference through Europe of alud, a lute. So they are lute shaped. But look at this. This is the rosette in the middle, which, bless his heart, this guy Peter, he always referred these two as a rosé. Peter's, it's R-O-S-E-T-T-E, rosette. Not rosé, but he was the expert. But these are Arabic characters.
Oh my God.
And these are the different scales or maqams that they use in their music. It just blows my mind that people can work at this level. Of course, keep in mind this was done at a time when there was nothing good on TV. So there still isn't anything good on TV. Fewer distractions. So yeah, this acquisition happened not long before I left the museum. Okay, one other quick coda here, then we got plenty of time for questions. Just whenever I'm out and about, if my spidey sense tells me there might be an instrument nearby, I'll go track it down. So my first visit ever to the Art Institute of Chicago a few years ago, I was there with my girlfriend, and she was kind of tiring out. I said, yeah, but I got to go see the Arms and Armor. I'm sorry, I'm a guy. I got to go see the Arms and Armor. And it was recently redone. So and my predecessor at the MFA had worked there, so I felt bad I never visited him when he was working there. But so I'm going to go look at the Arms and Armor, which was really quite spectacular. But on the way, Oh, what are those? Oh, Peruvian little bone whistle flute things. Oh my God, that one's exactly like the MFA. Oh yeah, it's Peru. Yeah, take some snapshots. Note for future reference. Okay, and then I get to the Arms and Armor room. I turn around and here's a beautifully decorated French drum from the 1770s and a German trumpet from 1720. It's like, was anybody ever going to tell me that these were just hanging out at the art institute, including my predecessor from the MFA? Like, these are very rare pieces, probably collected by Arms and Armor people. Like I said, the military people, they're the ones who do the drums. But here's these quite spectacular things tucked away in an art museum, so they're not at the top, and they don't have an instrument collection per se. I think it was on that same visit I was wandering around, and here was this spectacular 1818 Baltimore-made piano, which I also didn't know about. I'm planning to go back there. No one has ever looked closely at that. It was purchased as furniture, and it is beautiful furniture. It's also a piano. Take it apart. Take a look inside. So, well, anyway, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this kind of funny, brief look into the career of a museum curator, even if it's a curator who doesn't deal with the objects you usually find in museums. I really enjoyed all the projects that I've been privileged to work on over the year, and these amazing discoveries. But most importantly, I managed to do all this without growing up. Thank you for coming today. Well, I'm happy to take some questions. I know that there's some cookies waiting for us at the back of the room, but yes.
We've seen so many different sizes and different woods of the pianos, other than the strings. Does the size and the type of wood affect the sound?
In a piano or any instrument?
I'm thinking piano.
Yeah, I mean, the piano is basically a big wood solid framework with a thin wood membrane, the soundboard, that is critical to the sound. We're still unraveling some of that, but the choice of woods for the outside is really more cosmetic, like beautiful mahogany and rosewood. In something like a violin, where the whole body is sort of resonant, there the choice of woods is seemingly more critical. The piano, it's really only the soundboard itself. It's only about 1/4 of an inch thick spruce, same as the top of a violin. So it's the vibrating membrane. Other questions? Yes.
You mentioned a lot of the research in the New England area.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done much below the New England area, or is there nothing to?
Oh no, that's a good question. It's like, so with this guy Scher out of Philadelphia, like surely there must be instruments of his in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia. Can't find them. There's one piano at the Philadelphia Art Museum, but
nothing in Baltimore or any down.
Well, they start turning up in the South.
Mm-hmm.
There's one down near New Orleans, and I knew of one north of Nashville, but they start popping up. I made a trip to Tennessee last spring, and was it just last spring? I lose track of time since the pandemic and retirement, but there were 2 other by this guy Scher in the greater Nashville area. So I looked at 3 within 2 days that had been, in mansions or something like that. The one in New Orleans had been in a mansion. Tom finds this one at an auction in Kentucky.
And
I think
the other one was in Beaufort from when it was new. So he was obviously selling into the South.
Yeah. And it made me like, oh man, if I could take time to do a survey of the southern states, God knows what we would find.
Probably
They're just
is something.
Yeah. Well, one of the shares I looked at a place outside of Nashville, I said, do you have any other instruments besides the piano? Oh yeah, we got a harp, we got this guitar. And I thought, I'm Catholic in my interests, like whatever even drums, So I would love to do that. I need to find an army of people that will go out and find this stuff, because I think there's things to be found that these people go, well, I didn't know this was rare. I didn't know it was important. It doesn't play, you know. I said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't play. It's significant as an artifact. Yeah.
That oud that you acquired that is just very ornate.
Yep.
That looks like it might have a different sound because of the inverted L shape of the.
Players wax eloquent about subtle differences in how things feel and sound, and
Yeah.
and you know, depending on how much has been replaced or restored, and so there too. Go to YouTube MFA, and there's a beautiful, nice video of someone playing the manual oud. We're so blessed in Boston. We can call upon such a range of musicians to come in and play these instruments at a very high level.
So that design is more aesthetic than.
Now the L shape,
a
you mean the way
unique
that
sound.
where the tuning peg goes back at an angle? That's for, I'm told, is for balance. If that went straight off from the strings, the thing would be kind of tippy. By pulling the center of gravity back, it's better balanced
Makes sense.
that way. Yeah, it's ergonomic. Yes, you in the back.
Earlier, we were talking about pump organs. You were kind of joking about playing them. It's kind of like
Yeah.
doing this. The stirrup, is that a more ergonomic solution to that?
I don't know. Very short-lived. I don't know if you could just kind of get more. What's kind of odd with both those, with the one with the stirrup for sure, and also with the share, which has regular pedals. Most organs, including reed organs, you have a reservoir of air that you pump air into, and then that slowly feeds the reeds. It appears that neither the share nor that one made in Boston by Stewart, there's no reservoir. You're just directly pumping. And so if you're out of air, it's not. And so it's a direct feed, and that seems to be the case with the very earliest reed organs. It's like,
Maybe more expressive.
could be, you could kind of, your direct control of the airflow, but it's like, how do you do that though? How would you get a very smooth sustain? And unfortunately, organs are kind of outside of my main understanding, so I have to talk to others about that. But
Yeah, one other note, I found it interesting to hear the names that they were giving to some of these organ variations.
Mhm.
You used the word melodian. That's been recycled. Was it the NAMM show in 2009 when Hammond was introducing a new melodica,
Uh-huh.
a very nice one with pickups.
Yeah.
And they, I think because Hohner probably, I think that a trademark on the name melodica. They're
Yeah.
calling this a melodian.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where they came up with this in Bazan's time, that it's melodious, called it the melodian, and then there was another type of reed organ called the seraphine. You wouldn't want to just call something a reed organ. And these musical glasses that they made too, that they were marketed in Baltimore, it was the Grand Harmonicon. You couldn't just call them. You got to have the right name with it, product name. But yeah, Fizz Harmonica. Yeah.
In your travels, have you come across brass woodwinds that are historically relevant?
Oh yeah. Again, this is only the surface of what I've come across. I was trying to pick out things that looked good and had a good story behind them, but yeah, there's just it all starts back to me with that article about Benjamin Creer. It just opened my eyes. Like, we don't know squat. There is so much more to be discovered if we just took the time. And our field is tiny. And
So what is that?
oh, well, this is a friend of mine had staged a photo like this. That instrument, if you took it off my head, it's curved like that, so that you can put your hand in the bell and you can modify the sound. It's called a demi-lune, crescent moon trumpet. But a friend of mine said, yeah, it makes a nice headgear. So, couldn't miss that opportunity. Yes, down here.
Can you play either of these pianos?
Well, I'm trained as a keyboardist. So which ones do you mean?
I don't.
Any of them?
Is any one of them playable?
Well,
You can make music on it.
sometimes the slippery slope there is if something's really important historically and you start monkeying around with it and changing things, you're kind of erasing away some of the traces of what someone might want to research. But
one of the shears that you mentioned
Mhm.
is playable now downstairs.
Yeah, the beautiful one downstairs. You know, when I was working at the MFA, and my office was adjacent to the gallery, and I I could overhear what the visitors were asking the guards. And there was usually a series of questions. The first was usually, "Do you have a Stradivari violin?" They want to know, they've heard that name. The second was usually, "Does everything in here play?" They assume, "Why would you have an instrument? I see strings on it. I see reeds." What? And then the second question was, "And so who does play it?" And then the fourth was usually, "Can I play it?" And yeah, I mean, this is the funny thing with our field. It's like, yeah, people naturally want to hear this stuff, but it's a case by case basis, and you want to just hand it over to anybody, that might not know what they're doing or not make a good sound out of it. So, and the more complicated the mechanism, like pianos have all these moving parts and things that wear out that would have to be replaced if it's going to work well. So, but yeah, we're lucky. There are people that have rediscovered these traditions. I was talking with this fine gentleman about ouds yesterday. That there's a lot of people in the area that play oud. So, including him. Yeah.
So a young person that would be interested in this field, where would they go to acquire this kind of knowledge? Say they're thinking about college or they're in undergraduate years and they're really excited about this field. What's the best avenue for acquiring that knowledge?
They should probably start by going to see a psychiatrist and really assess whether this is a wise thing to do. No, it's tough because there's only so many jobs in this field, and I feel just so lucky or whatever. I don't know. I did not plan this out. It's just this sequence of things. I did not have a plan here of I'm going to do this and that's going to do this. Now, the National Music Museum in Vermillion, South Dakota, part of the university there, has a program, a master's program in the history of musical instruments. I went to school there. The guy who's the head of the collection at the Met went to school there. He's also from South Dakota. A young man who used to work with me and is now deputy director at the National Music Museum. He went through that program. So that was a training ground for some of us. That program went on hiatus for a while. And I think it's coming back now. They're thinking about whether it should be a PhD program or not. There was a course, there was a program at Edinburgh University that cranked out some people with PhDs, that some of whom have jobs in museums. But it, try to get an internship someplace where you can kind of learn and see if a bit of on-the-job training. But it's, because countless students have said to me, I've been interviewed for years, mostly about the guitar show for some reason. They want to know that's so cool. I want to do that. I said, good luck, because I cannot give you a set of, here's what you need to do. Just if you got to do it though, don't, if you're passionate about it, as I have a good friend who's a, musician and, well, not practicing so much anymore, but his daughter wanted to become a singer-songwriter, and she moved to California, and it's like, how can he possibly discourage her from that? That's what she's got to do. And he did it. So, I'm lucky. My working class parents in South Dakota probably didn't know any better to say to me, like, don't do this. And fortunately, I had a hippie older brother who came back from his first year of college and says, I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to study art. So by the time I said I'm going to study the harpsichord, they go, can't be any worse than Dennis. So, because they're just worried, can you make a living? But there's more to making a living than the money. I've had the coolest job in the world. I had such job satisfaction, and it's a tough question to answer. But I do what I can. The American Musical Instrument Society does what they can to foster this interest. Gives travel grants to students to come to our conferences and network with people. And networking may be a very tired old term, but that is really still key to how a lot of this happens, is to get yourself in there and get to know people. But there's there's an endless amount to learn. People, you know so much about musical instruments. I go, I know a lot about a lot of them, but there's a whole world from African harps to pianos to like I can't possibly know as much as one would ideally know about everything. So, but that's what the fun of it. There's just so much diversity of what you get to play with. So, yeah.
I know this is not the antique road show.
It isn't?
I have an instrument from
Oh.
what I think is the middle 1800s. Would you care to look at it and tell us what it is?
Tom and I can both look at it and
Now?
well, probably be discreet. Wait, yeah, yeah. I don't want to do name that instrument here. We're just about to the end here, but do feel free to come up and ask other questions if you're too shy to raise your hand. I'm not going anywhere till all the cookies are gone. So, but no, you've been a most gracious audience and gave me good energy to do my shtick here. People say, well, you're always yucking it up here. I said, yeah, I kind of wanted to be stand-up comedian really, but that's a hard job. So I kind of got into this and kind of use instruments as my props, to tell the jokes. So yeah. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.